Now, happens to be we're on the 30th of Shvat. It's going to mark the Hilula of a former, let's say, head Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Porat Yosef, one of the, let's say, the bastion of Sephardic Yeshivot, and he did many other famous positions. His name was Rabbi Yosef Chaim Kopshitz. He actually passed away very recently. I believe he passed away 3 years ago on the 21st of February in the year 2023. He passed away. That was naturally the 30th of Shvat that happened to be just before Rosh Chodesh Shvat. He was actually born all the way back in the year 1934. I think precisely it was on the eve of Hanukkah, on the 24th of Kislev, when he happened to have been born. And he'd gone to become head of Yeshivat Porat Yosef, I think the old city itself of Jerusalem. And he was part, I think it was one of the Chavaba Ada Haruchanit Shel Yated Ne'eman, very much connected to the newspaper Yated Ne'eman, which is very, very interesting. So very much decorated career, let's just say, in turn. I'm just going to say a blessing for the coffee. Baruch atah Ma'olam she'akol niyeh b'dvara. As we're exploring a few of the highlights of the famous rabbi's life, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Kopshitz. He was born in Jerusalem. Obviously, it was part of Palestine at that point in time. In Jerusalem, he would pass away. He was, I believe, 88 years of age when he passed away. And yeah, very, very interesting. So he was born in Jerusalem. I believe his father's name was Rav Tzvi Hirsch Kopshitz. And he was, I think, one Shaya Morasheh Beit Yitomim Diskin. He was very much part of in itself. Some Chaya Ruchma. I think his mother's name was Rabbanit Chaya Ruchma, who was the daughter of Rabbi Shmuel Hillel Shinker, if I'm not mistaken. Nechedat Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. So really, Rav Kopshitz would come from very, very famous, let's say, yichus in of its own right. So that's something we have to point out. And b'tzirato lemad b'talmud Torah Etz Chaim. He would learn actually in the Talmudic Academy of Etz Chaim when he was young. V'lacham mehen Yeshivat Porat Tzvi. He would then go on to learn in the Yeshivat Porat Tzvi, and then Yeshivat Hebron in Jerusalem. V'hayam karov l'Rosh Yeshiva Harav Yecheskel Sarna. He was, I think, very close to the famous Rosh Yeshiva at that point in time, Rabbi Yecheskel Sarna, a rabbi I think we mentioned about before in this series. Lacha nisuav l'Tova Bralinsky. He'd go Shchonat Geula b'Yerushalayim. So he'd go on to live in the Geula neighborhood in Jerusalem. He'd get married to Rabbanit Tova from the Bralinsky family. Lacha hakmata machadash shel Yeshivat Porat Yosef hachal lelamed ba letzat harav Shalom Cohen v'Rav Moshe Tzadka. There'll be the opening of, I believe, the Yeshivat Porat Yosef over there in that specific neighborhood. So he would actually become a Talmid over there in Yeshivat Porat Yosef, alongside with the former Shas political party rabbi, spiritual head, Rav Shalom Cohen, who we actually did attend his funeral at the time. That was back in 2022, I think in August. And Rav Moshe Tzadka, who's the current Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Porat Yosef. He did go on to learn to actually live in the Nevei Tzvi neighborhood in Jerusalem. He was actually considered one of the rabbis of this specific neighborhood of Nevei Tzvi. Very interesting enough. I think came on the year Tafshin Mem Hey. There'll be the opening, let's just say, of news publication called Yated Ne'eman. He became, let us say, a spiritual figure within regards to this newspaper, alongside other rabbanim, alongside Rabbi Natan Zuchowski, Rabbi Shmuel Deutsch, and various other rabbis also we have to point out over here. And that's actually interesting. Harav Kopshitz nechshav makarov l'manhigei hatzibur haliti. He was seen as one of the leaders, let's just say, in the Lithuanian Torah community, alongside other famous rabbis, Rav Shach, Rav Eliashiv, and Rav Steinman. These are many of these rabbis who become, let's say, heads of the Lithuanian political party, spiritual heads in its own. I think Rav Steinman passed away. Actually, he passed away on the eve of Hanukkah in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So it's very involved, I think, also in of itself. But Sof Shanat Heitoshin Ayin Gimel, at the end of this specific year, Hekimu Talmidav Seminar Lebanot Svardiot Yerushalayim B'Shem Benot Eliashiv. They would actually open a seminary. He would for the Sephardic girls, the Spanish girls, called the Benot Eliashiv, Al Shemo Shel Rav Eliashiv, under his name in himself. Who Kihen Barosh Ha'Va'ada Haruchonit Shel Seminar. So we come, let's say, the spiritual leader, committee leader of this important seminary in of itself in Jerusalem. I think it was in the year Heitoshin Ayin Vav. Mona Af L'Nasi Seminar Benot Tamar. He would go on to become the president of the a seminary called the Benot Tamar, the daughters of Tamar. Al Shema Shel Rabbanit Tamar Steinman. This will be under the name of Rabbanit Tamar Steinman. Ishto Shel Harab Aaron Leib Steinman, who happened to be the daughter of Rab Aaron Leib Steinman. Ben Talmidav Amufrosim Haya Harab Elazar Abu Chatzera. So one of his outstanding Talmidim, who was spoken out on various occasions for, was the famous Rab Elazar Abu Chatzera. Shevi Haracha Rabba Alav Ayat Nose Alav Latzik Befanav Koshiot Toroniot. So very interesting. So he had like a huge connection, let's just say, with the Sephardic Rabbonim in of itself and the Sephardic education structure. Now he passed away on the 30th of Shvat in the year Hetaf Shin Pei Gimel. Naturally, that was 2023 in of its own right, respectively. So at the time of his Kilula, and he was buried in Har Zaytim over there. Obviously, they call that the Mount of Olives burial plot over there. So don't forget to light a candle in his memory. Let's explore his family structure in himself. Rav Kopshitz again, the Suit Letova. So he had 9 children reported over, and he lived obviously in the Neve Tzvi neighborhood in Jerusalem. We have to point out Achiv Rab Avram Kopshitz. His brother was Rab Avram Kopshitz, who was a rabbi of the Shkunat Neve Tzvi in Jerusalem. Very prominent position. And actually, interesting enough, his other brother, Rab Yisrael Aaron Kopshitz, was a ram in Yeshivat Torah Or in the Sanhedrin neighborhood in Jerusalem. I think we visited Torah Or beforehand here in the channel. Achoto Leah Hayita Riyato Shel Harav Nisim Karelit. Very, very connected. Achiv Arav Moshe Pinchas Kopshitz Hayarav Chanichei Yeshivot B'Shchunat Remeima Umorashei Yeshivot Kol Yaakov. He would become the Rosh Yeshiva of Kol Yaakov. Achiv Arav Natan Kopshitz Rav HaKriya HaCharedit. He become the rabbi of the Kriya HaCharedit in Beit Shemesh. Very interesting enough, very close to our house, to where I'm actually recording this at the moment. And he was a Dayan of the B'dat Ha'ida HaCharedit in Jerusalem. So another very prominent position his brother will have. Now let's explore about some of his Talmidim and rabbis he was close to also, because he would become the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Porat Yosef and would head various different Sephardic educational networks in Brazil. So one of his star students was Rab Elazar Abu Chatzera. Rab Elazar was born in 1948, and I think he was murdered in 29th of July in 2011. And he was a famous rabbi, he was a Kabbalist, and came from the famous Mishpachat Abu Chatzera. I think it was from a mentally ill person that would actually carry out that atrocity. This was at the end of July 2011, we have to point out. And from the famous Abu Chatzera family, I think he, Benosh Rabbi Meir Abu Chatzera, he was son of Rabbi Meir Abu Chatzera, and the grandson of the famous Rabbi Sali, Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzera, I have to point out, and is known as one of the outstanding let's say great rabbis of his time, if I'm not mistaken. So he actually left the world on 27th of Tammuz in 2011. He was only 62 years of age. At that point in time, he was a famous Moroccan rabbi, and he was a rabbi. He had many great students. I think the Harav Avram Yisrael Rubin, Rab Avram Vazana, if I'm not mistaken. His father obviously was among his son, his children, Rab Pinchas Abu Chatzera, famous rabbi here of modern day. That's what we have to point out with that in regards to him. Now he was also learning, when he was learning in Yeshivat Porat Yosef, going back to Rabbi Kopshitz, he was learning Rab Moshe Tzadka, and Rab Moshe Tzadka is currently the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Porat Yosef in the Geula neighborhood in Jerusalem. It's actually interesting. He was born, I think, on Shushan Purim, all the way back in the year 1935. So he's about 90 years of age at the moment. Obviously, he was born in Jerusalem, and his father's famous Rabbi Yehuda Tzadka later on become the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Porat Yosef. He was born in Jerusalem to Rabbi Yehuda Tzadka, and very, very nice. Hema Lebeit Batat. I think his mother was from the Batat family, if I'm not mistaken. Imot Shel Aviv, Harabanit Simcha, he bat Achoto Shel Rabbi Yosef Chaim Baghdad. Wow, very, very interesting enough. You can see the yichus he had. Dodotom Mazal Muzlani, Nisol Rav Salmon Eliyahu, Avihem Shel Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. So there was connection with Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, but Rav Naim Ben Eliyahu, another great rabbi that was connected to Rav Moshe Tzadka. Achiv Ayu, Harav David Tzadka, Rabbash Shel Pardes Chana, is I think brother will be the rabbi of Pardes Chana, Eliyahu, Shaul V'Shlomo. Achoto Sima Nisal Rabbi Shkenazi. Yeah, very interesting. Who was he? He's happens to be the head of Jewish court of the Eida Haredit Sfardit. Interesting enough. It's actually interesting. Rav Moshe Tzadka would learn in Talmud Torah, the famous Talmud Torah called Bnei Tzion when he was young, in the Bukharian neighborhood, and very, very interesting enough. Achat hadmiyot asher hishpiu alav ma'od bilato Rav Shlomo Marabi. He was actually very much influenced by Rav Shlomo Marabi. In mitzvot מלמדי התלמוד תורה, אל תלמוד תורה היה מגיע לעתים רחוקים, גם הרב עזרא עטיה ובוחן את התלמידים. So he was close to Rav Ezra Atiyah also, to point out. משם המשיך. I think later on he'll go on to learn in Yeshiva Ketana called Mokor Chaim, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he would learn under Chacham Rabbi Yosef also. And he would work as a ram for the young people inside the yeshiva. Interesting enough. For example, Rav Moshe Tzadka would learn at a young age. Wow, it was known as a proper Eloi inside the yeshiva. He would actually go on, and then he'd go on to learn in Yeshivat Meir. Sham Lamad Meshech Tkuva B'Chavruta. He would learn with the Chavruta. Im Rosh Yeshiva Harab Chaim Shmulevitz. He would actually learn with the famous Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. V'Hemshech Nichnas Lilmod Yeshivat Porat Yosef. Eventually, he would go on to learn in Yeshivat Porat Yosef. Etzel Aviv, and next to Rav Yehuda Tzadka, and also Rabbi Ezra Atiyah. Also, we have to point out over here. Anyone tuning in live, please at the moment, please subscribe to the channel over here, and welcome to our community. We really, really appreciate it, and we're exploring the life within regards to Rav Kopshitz, who was Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Porat Yosef over here today. It happens to be Silula here on the 30th of Shvat, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're just speaking about some of the rabbis he happened to be close to also. So I think he would, after he got married, Rav Moshe Tzadka, he would go on to learn in Kolel Otzeh Chayim, and in Heitashin Chavtet, he would learn in the Yeshivat Reshit Chochmah, which is under Rav Shabtai Aton, another great rabbi. I think it's his Kilula around this couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Over there, he'd do a lot of Kiruv, he bit Torah B'meshech Asrot Shanim for tens of years. After his father passed away in 1991, at the time period, I think it was 56, he would start working as a ram in Yeshivat Porat Yosef in the Geula neighborhood, alongside Rabbi Yehuda Moalem. And after Rabbi Ben-Zion Abba Shaul passed away, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was around the year 2000, he would be appointed Rosh Yeshiva in his place. Very, very interesting enough. So just like he was learning with Rav Kopshitz when he was young, he'd go on to become a Rosh Yeshiva ahead of Porat Yosef, just like Rav Kopshitz would also. Yeah, so many shirim have been given, and many hundreds in of itself, and he is known as one of the most powerful leaders in the Sephardic world in of itself. Now, just to point out, Rav Tzadka, I think, would actually lives in the Shmuel Hanavi neighborhood in Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. And I think his wife's name is Rabbanit Karmala, if I'm not mistaken. They had three boys, 3 girls. I think one of his sons, Rabbi Yair Tzadka, is a ram in Yeshivat Porat Yosef, we have to point out, in the Geula branch. And the Rosh Yeshiva of the young people of Porat Yosef, Chatono is Chatan. Rabbi Yisrael Levi is Rosh Kolel Ashkelon, and Dayan also judge. Beit Din in Ashdod, and Rosh Yeshiva Tiferet Torah, the younger students. Another one of his Chatans, Rabbi Yeshua Atiyah, is Rosh Kolel of Sharei Yeshua. Another one of his son-in-laws, Chatano, Rav Shmuel Navon, is a rabbi of the congregation in Beitar Elite, in the place we visited before in this channel, this city. And his brother, Arab David, Rabbi Shel Pardas Chana. Very, very interesting enough. So another one of the rabbis that Rav Kopshitz was close to was Rav Shalom Cohen. Who was Rav Shalom Cohen? He passed away quite recently in 2022. He was born actually all the way back in 1930. He passed away on the 25th of Ab. This was back in 2022. He'd go on to become the Rosh Yeshiva, also of Porat Yosef, in the Old City. And the president, Nasi Moatzot Chachmei Torah Shem Mefleget Shas, for the Shas political party. He also was born in Jerusalem, at the time Palestine, on the 12th of Cheshvan in 1930. He passed away in Jerusalem. He was 91 years of age. And among his rabbis include his father, Rabbi Ephraim Cohen, and Rabbi Ezra Atiyah, we have to point out. Among his outstanding Talmudim includes Rab Zami Cohen and Rab David Chai Abu Chatzera. And he actually was president of the Moatzot Chachmei HaTorah between 17th of April 2014 till 22nd of August, the time of his passing, in between Rav Ovadia Yosef and Rav Shimon Badani, we had to point out. And he actually himself, Rav Shalom Cohen, was born in Jerusalem, and He came from great auspices. His father, Rabbi Ephraim Kohen, and his mother, Rabbanit Malka, Rosh Yeshiva, I think, of the Kabbalistic yeshiva called Ozva Hadar. Yeshivat Porat Yosef in the old city of itself in Jerusalem. The family itself, I think, actually came from Iraq, we have to point out. And I think he'd be one of 10 brothers, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, he would actually learn also in the famous Yeshivat Talmud Torah B'nai Tzion when he was young, just like many of the great Rabbanim with. Then he would go on to learn Rosh Hashanah in Yeshivat Porat Yosef. He would learn, I think, for 3 years inside the famous shiur of Rabbi Yehuda Tzadka, was one of the great rabbis there. He would learn in a chavruta with Rabbi Tzvi Simantov and Rabbi Yosef, we have to point out. And he was also very close to Rabbi Ezra Atiyah, and his wife's name is Rabbanit Yael, and she happens to be the daughter of Rabbi Mansur ben Shimon. Rabbi Mansur ben Shimon also comes from a very famous rabbinic line of great, and was also rabbi in Yeshivat Porat Yosef. After he got married in the year Tafshin Yudaled, he would be appointed a ram in Yeshivat Porat Yosef, and and I think that's when there was a branch in Katamon, if I'm not mistaken, Jerusalem, in Tafshin Lamed Bet. I think Rob Badani would actually get another position, so he will maybe come in his place, if I'm not mistaken. In Tafshin Lamed Zayin, he would, along with Rabbi Shimon Badani, they would open up a branch of Yeshivat Porat Yosef in the old city, and in the Ha'ira Havitka itself. Obviously, I think we talked about that, a branch in Geula also, so very, very interesting enough. Very interesting. He passed away, he was 91 years of age, if I'm not mistaken, and I think he passed away in Hadassah in Kerem at that point in time, and his funeral was attended by a couple of 100,000 people at least, and that was on 25th of August in the year 2022. That's something we have to very much point out. And so let's just speak a bit about the Yeshivat Porat Yosef. That's a very great, let's just say, Talmudic schedule in of itself. What is Yeshivat Porat Yosef? Obviously, I think a Sephardic yeshiva in Jerusalem. Obviously, the name Porat Yosef means that Joseph is a fruitful tree. It's after a verse in the book of Genesis in Bereshit, in chapter 49, verse 22. It's actually interesting. Yeshivat Ohel Moed was originally founded by the famous Rabbi Ezra Harari Raful and Rabbi Raphael Shlomo Laniado. This was back in the year 1904 in Jerusalem. This Yeshivat Ohel Moed was a forerunner to Yeshivat Porat Yosef, and Rabbi Raphael Harari Raful would also open in 1918 a yeshiva that merged with Porat Yosef in 1923. So you can say, it's actually interesting. The Yeshivat Porat Yosef itself, which Rav Kopshitz, who was speaking about in today's class, was a Rosh Yeshiva of. So this yeshiva, the cornerstone was laid actually all the way back in 1914. It was someone named Yosef Shalom, who was a famous Baghdadi philanthropist. He actually had been from Calcutta in India, would originally purchase this site, which is overlooking Temple Mount, with intention of building a hospital. Now, we've spoken about this before in other videos. And when he wrote to the famous Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, for his opinion on this, the great rabbi would persuade him to endow a yeshiva instead. The construction, I think, initially was delayed, we have to point out, because of the First World War, and the yeshiva was finally inaugurated in the year 1923 with a great campus, with a large Bet Midrash in himself, 2 smaller study halls, a kollel, and I think there was as many as 50 other rooms and dormitories. There was a library over there, and it's actually very, very interesting. So many different stories can be actually pointed out within regards to this famous Yeshiva Talmudic Academy. And the curriculum in of itself of Yeshivat Porat Yosef is one on studying of Talmud, Gemara, Poskim, various laws, and the commentaries of the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch. Obviously, the first Rosh Yeshiva, if I'm not mistaken, Porat Yosef in 1923 was Rabbi Raphael Shlomo Laniado, who we've spoken about before in this series. I think he passed away in 1925. Then Rabbi Ezra Atiyah will become the next Rosh Yeshiva over there. He would be in this position for a staggering 45 years. And the old city branch of the yeshiva was led by Rabbi Ben Sion Meir Hai Uziel, who he himself was the chief rabbi of Israel between 1948 to 1953. If I'm not mistaken, the old city branch, he was succeeded, Rabbi Uziel, by Rabbi Shalom Cohen until he passed away in 2022. And it's actually interesting. Rabbi Yosef Kopshitz was Rosh Yeshiva in the Old City branch until he passed away in the year 2023. Now, obviously, there's a Geula branch over there headed by Rabbi Yehuda Tzadka. This was between 1970 to 1983. It was followed by Rabbi Ben Zion Abba Shaul, who would lead the Geula branch until his death in 1998, and the Rosh Yeshiva of the Geula branch, obviously currently is Rabbi Moshe Tzadka. Now, it's an all-star lineup who is the alumni of this famous yeshiva. Rabbi Ben Zion Abba Shaul, who will go on to become the Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Amram Aburba, who was Sephardic chief rabbi of Petach Tikva. He was Rabbi Baruch Ben Chaim, the leader of the Brooklyn Syrian Jewish community, would be a student there. Rabbi Eliyahu Ben Chaim, a famous rabbi of the Mashadi community of Great Neck, and the Rosh Yeshiva of the Riatas Yeshiva University, and director of the Sephardic Semicha Shiur, and Rosh Kollel in Queens himself. Rabbi Aryeh Deri, who's the leader of the Shas political party. Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, who'd go. Rabbi Yitzchak Kaduri, the famous Kabbalist. Rabbi Tzion Levi was a chief rabbi of Panama. Rabbi Isaac Saka, who'd go on to become the Sephardic chief rabbi of Buenos Aires. Eli Ishai, who would also become a leader of the Shas political party. Obviously, Rabbi Yehuda Tzadka, Rabbi Obadiah Yosef, who was a Sephardic chief rabbi. Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, the Sephardic chief rabbi. So you can see this yeshiva, the which Rav Kopshitz would have the premiership for a window of time, how great this yeshiva was in of itself. So very, very interesting. So so Rav Kopshitz, just going back to him, he was married to Rabbanit Tova. They had 9 children before, and I think Rav Avram Kopshitz, we said before, was his brother, Rav Yisrael Aaron Kopshitz, and we did speak about his family already over here. That's something that we have to point out. And I think he had connection also, as we said before, to the Yeshivat Kol Yaakov, we have to point out, which is actually a large yeshiva, also based in Beit Vegan. I think he learned there at one stage of time, or had a connection to it. That one of the founders included Rabbi Yehuda Addis, Rabbi Daniel Addis, if I'm not mistaken, was connected very much with Rabbi Yaakov Chai Addis, this yeshiva. And many great rabbis who come part of the mansion, including Rabbi Yitzhak Greenwald, Rabbi Yehuda Addis, Rabbi Hillel Brisk, Rabbi Yoel Addis, Rabbi Daniel Addis. I think it's currently Rabbi Yehuda Addis and Rabbi Moshe Bracha have important positions in of itself. And I think it was actually founded by rabbis that were connected very much to Yeshivat Porat Yosef, if I'm not mistaken. And I think this Yeshiva Kol Yaakov is very much a support framework to rabbis that were part of that would learn actually in more Lithuanian yeshivot, if I'm not mistaken. So they would have many Ashkenazic students. Also, we have to point out, we're just going to take a short 1-minute break at the moment, and we'll come back. Okay, shalom everyone. We're exploring. It's a Hilula of Rabbi Yosef Kopshitz over here today. So we happen to be speaking about him. We said before he was part of Yeshivat Kol Torah over here. So that was famous yeshiva, which would have many. Also, Yeshivat Kol Torah would have many famous rabbis part of it. Not just Rav Kopshitz would learn there. Rabbi Yaakov Addis, Rabbi Shlomo Yedidia Stafrani, another famous rabbi. If I'm not mistaken, Rav Eliyahu Bakshi, the one who going to become chief rabbi. Rabbi Ronen Lubitz, Rabbi Yaakov Rivlin also will be. Rabbi Yishai, also a famous singer, or someone named Yishai Lapidot will also be part over there. Rabbi Asher Hamoy was head of Abnei Netze Yeshiva, and Ofir Malka, Rabbi Ofir Malka. So Yeshivat Kol Yaakov is another very famous yeshiva, let's just say, in of its own right. So something very, very interesting over here. And we're just going to be back in half a minute over here, and we're just going to conclude just a presentation. Just watch your space, and we're back in half a minute, friends. Okay. So in the meantime, please subscribe to the channel, and we'll part a word in a minute. Yes, so everyone over here, we are actually on the 30th of Shvat, just on the eve of Rosh Chodesh Adar. Today, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. We're coming to a joyous time period in of itself. Also marks the Hilula of famous Rabbi Yosef Kopshitz, very, very great rabbi of his time, a rabbi we've spoken about here on various occasions before, and he happens to have been a Rosh Yeshiva of the famous Yeshivat Porat Yosef, the bastion of the Sephardic Yeshivot in Israel. So please don't forget to light candles in his memory. And friends, we're a community over here. We are exploring the history within regards to great rabbis of yesteryear. And if you descend from any of the great rabbis we happen to be speaking about over here, please send me a message. I would love to know more information. And we don't just record videos of great rabbis of yesteryear. We also record let's say history videos within regards to various countries from across the world. We are exploring all the countries at the moment, the rabbinic structures. We're speaking about various yeshivot that there happens to be, and so on and so forth. So much great content, and we actually record with the great rabbinic personality of current year, let's just say, in of itself, and very, very exciting. And happens to be speaking about Rabbi Yosef Chaim Copshitz over here on this special edition, who passed away 3 years ago here from the time of recording. And very, very interesting enough. And he was 88 years of age when the great rabbi passed away. He was buried in Har Hazeitim. So don't forget to light candles in his memory, and don't forget also, please subscribe to the channel and join our community. Thanks for watching, everyone.